Larry, when it comes to the Netanyahu and the way we know that CNN and Axios, they were reporting that Israel is preparing to attack on Iran, not a single attack, but for several days they're planning to do it. How do you see, if we assume Netanyahu and compare it to Zelensky? I know that is not even comparable. They're two different cases, but he knows the way that Donald Trump has treated Zelensky. If he decides to go the way that Zelensky went against Donald Trump, do you think that Donald Trump right now let him to attack Iran?
I really don't know, because Trump has been all over the board on this. Mm-hmm. Look, Israel without the United States does not have the ability to launch any kind of significant attack against Iran, short of launching a nuclear missile at them. There is, I must confess, a part of me that wants Israel to, as they say, FAFO, FAFO, because in their hubris and their arrogance, if they decide to unilaterally attack Iran, they're going to get more than their nose bloody. They're going to be decimated. They're going to find out that their so-called military supremacy is not that at all. Trump has painted himself into a bit of a corner, and right, as we're talking now, the negotiations or the talks are underway in Rome between Iran and the United States. And Foreign Minister Araghchi put it out very, very clearly yesterday. He says, no nuclear weapons, then we have a deal. No enrichment, no deal. And Iran's made it very clear. If what the United States is seeking is a rock-solid guarantee that Iran's not building and has not built and is not going to build a nuclear weapon and will not enrich uranium at a level that would create the necessary fuel for such a device, then the deal is there to be had. Iran will sign on to that because Iran does not want a nuclear weapon now. But if the United States insists, as Steve Witkoff said the other day, they can't have a single ounce of enrichment, 0%. And while we're at it, get rid of your missile force and stop. You can't have any more contacts with Hezbollah, Hamas, and Houthis. Iran's going to walk away. So then at that point, it's going to be in Trump's hands to decide if he's going to make good on his threats. I'm hoping that there are some sane people still in the Pentagon and at CIA that will remind him that we couldn't stop the Houthis, and the Iranians represent a much more formidable challenge if we're going to talk about attacking anyone.
Carl, just getting back to the first point that Larry made about the Israeli attack on Iran. And his last point was the way that the United States decided to leave Yemeni waters because they made a deal with Yemen. How can that come to the mind of Netanyahu and his administration that the United States that came to Yemen, they wanted to defeat Yemen, they have decided to get out of the region, that region. Right now they're getting back to help. They're going to get back to help Israel in any sort of Israeli attack on Iran. Is that going to be the case in the mind of Israelis, or they don't care about the United States if they're going to be there helping them or not?
I don't think these people make those kind of connections, Nima. And here's my fear, great fear. From everything I'm hearing, the IDF is falling apart. Whether you want to talk about the post-traumatic stress disorder numbers, or you want to talk about the 10,000 or so ultra-Orthodox who are really perturbing the ranks now that they've answered the call. The only ones who did, I think the draft was for about 100,000 or so. They got 10,000. You have a military that is getting very fatigued, battle-worn. You have an incredible vast array of threats that might come alive at any moment. You have a contest they cannot possibly win. You have ideal terrain now for what I call rubbled urban warfare, which is on the side of the insurgent, not the conventional military. And you have the political disaster that's looming over Netanyahu. You have a problem that Netanyahu is going to settle the only way he knows how. And that's by, despite Donald Trump saying, if you attack Iran, I'm not with you, Donald Trump will find the pressure on him so great he'll have to be. So Bibi is going to attack Iran on his own. That's his last-ditch effort to maintain his non-jail status and to maintain his control over what's left of Israel. And what's left of Israel is a remnant of what was there prior to October the 7th. That's my fear, is he is going to lead us into war. And Trump won't be able to say, as he did with the Houthis, I'm not going with you, or I'm not going to do this. He might try, but he's not going to be able to do it. He'll have the entire Republican legislature on his back, in addition to all the people with the money, from Adelson's to others, and he'll have all those people that we've heard examples of. He doesn't want that. So he's going to have to go with them, and that's going to be a supreme tragedy because, as Larry said, we're going to lose, both of us.
Yeah.
Larry, people are talking about, even within MAGA, they're talking about MAGA means make Adelson govern America, not make America great again. How do they feel right now about the case of Israel, majority, in your opinion?
Well, that's an interesting phenomenon, and I think it's also alarming Israel. People under the age of 50 that aren't necessarily involved with politics are increasingly turning against Israel because they're not watching CNN or Fox News or MSNBC or any of the legacy media, which is funded by and controlled by people entirely sympathetic and enabling of Israel and its murders and its genocide. And this segment of America is increasingly skeptical because they're seeing it on TikTok, they're seeing it on X, just the horrific images of the starving children, for starters. That's really been, I think, the turning point in public opinion. Yet the control of this Zionist lobby over our policy, just before we coming on with you, I was reading that Steve Witkoff was meeting with two Israeli officials, one of the Israeli ambassador to the United States. And the meeting went 40 minutes longer because those two representatives, Netanyahu, were pressing Witkoff to ensure that zero enrichment for Iran. You got to wipe them and no missiles. Now, the fact that a foreign government's sitting there trying to tell an envoy of the president of the United States what to do, he should have told them to go have sexual relations with their mothers. But so it's just the audacity of it. It is, I'm personally growing tired of it. I think it's going to come to a head at some point, and Iran may be that breaking point. That when Israel, we'll launch an attack, we're going to lose some planes, we're going to lose some Air Force personnel, we may lose a ship or two, and we'll certainly have soldiers killed in the Persian Gulf, probably at Al Udeid Air Force Base. And so when the smoke settles, there's not going to be a lot of happiness with Israel for getting us into this mess. And there'll also be pushback, blowback on Trump. Trump is he's caught. What's unfortunate is he's a weak man. He doesn't have a backbone. Because the political waves, in terms of the Congress, they are so enamored of destroying Iran in supporting Israel, that there's no rational thought. And we're seeing the same phenomena with respect to Russia.
Yeah. And there's Nima, there's no consideration really of the very clear fact that Russia is tied to Iran now, and that China has deep interest there too. You know, we've got that railroad running now, a railroad that brought 150 cars, as I understand it, along the coast there and into Iran. It runs from China to Iran. It's functional now. It's doing its thing. China's going to be right there with Russia, if not a protagonist. It's going to be a supporter big time. So if we want to bring everything on, we're going to bring everything on, and we're going to do it in Southwest Asia. It's not going to be Taiwan.
Yeah, just to do a quick plug, Pepe Escobar just published on Sputnik a full report on his visit to Iran regarding the International North-South Corridor. He's even got an acronym for it, though, the INSC. But laying out how what a sort of this is a game changer economically on the international trade front, and it's going to relegate the Suez Canal to not being as relevant and as critical as it has been.
If you go back to the old days, you'll find that was a ploy that was used by two empires who joined together to put three other empires out of business economically. And it worked. It worked over, 50 to 100 years, but they changed the whole face of trade by going another direction and cutting off the other empires from their trade routes, because their trade routes became vastly more expensive than the one that was created, and replaced them. That's an old tool of empire. The British played it to a hilt, and the Russians tried to get after the British to keep them from doing it in a very key place, the Persian Gulf. Russians were never quite able to push the British out because the British had such a strong foothold. But this is games of empire. This is what happens. And we forced this one. We forced this one through stupidity, strategic stupidity.
Colonel, Larry mentioned the way that Iranian foreign minister pictured the situation right now between Iran and the United States, that no nuclear weapons equals to having a deal, and no nuclear enrichment equals to no deal. Look at the Iranian history in terms of their nuclear program, the way that they have been sacrificing a lot during the process of building the nuclear energy systems. How can that be possible in the mind of Donald Trump, or even, I don't know if Steve Witkoff is somehow familiar with the history of the Iranian nuclear program, but someone who understands the case of Iran, how can they imagine that Iran would just simply give up on their nuclear program?
Well, they don't know the history, Nima. That's the simple answer. I heard yesterday that there was talk around Witkoff of, well, we're not really going to insist on zero enrichment, except maybe for 3 years. And then the oil will, wash away, and then they can slowly creep back in. And as everyone has suggested who knows anything about this history, that's nonsense. That's nonsense. We're talking about people who spent blood and treasure, blood in nuclear scientists who've been assassinated or murdered by Israel, and treasure in terms of the billions they spent on the program. And under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the Additional Protocol, and the Safeguards Agreement, all of which they are signatory to, and basically, according to the IAEA and the people I know there, they actually did a pretty good job during the period of the JCPOA when it was operational with us, and then afterwards when it was operational with the others, of adhering to the dictates of those agreements. So it's looking down at an inferior race, an inferior state. That's the problem here. You can't enrich. That country up there just to the north of you, that country has nuclear weapons too, and they're not NPT members, and they're okay with it. But we can't let you do it because you're terrible. And as Larry's pointed out a number of times, show me where they're state sponsors of terrorism in any significant way that compares, for example, with the Saudis and with others associated with them. This is nonsense, and yet we're doing it. We're doing it, and we're doing it at our peril.
Larry, can we say that one of the main reasons that Arab states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar were somehow, they announced big numbers of investment in the United States. What do they want from the United States when it comes to their region, to the West Asia, to the Middle East?
Well, the promise of investment doesn't necessarily add up when you look at the actual numbers, of their gross domestic product, their actual wealth. Look, I may be naively grasping at straws, but I take into account the fact that more than a month ago, the brother of Mohammed bin Salman, I guess he's the defense minister, went to Iran and met with the Ayatollah Khamenei, met with Pezeshkian, met with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders, and there were explicit pledges of support, mutual support between the two, in terms of actually, calling each other brothers, even though they had been at war and at odds, for generations. So when Mohammed bin Salman makes a deal with Donald Trump, I wonder if behind the scenes he's telling Trump, we'll go through with this, but don't attack Iran, and you got to stop the genocide in Palestine. Now, I believe the Gulf Arabs are in a position to make that kind of demand of Donald Trump, and Trump's desire to, get the Abraham Accords advanced. If nothing else, that appeal to his vanity might work in getting Trump to moderate. But there's still the hold that the Zionist lobby has over Trump and the money he's taken, and his own, I think, ideological prejudices weigh in, which makes, it's very iffy. I'll put it simply. I think the Gulf Arabs are in a position to at least give Trump pause before supporting any kind of attack on Iran, because they recognize that if there is such an attack, Iran's going to shut down the Persian Gulf, and then they are screwed, because oil is not going to be going out, revenue's not going to be coming in. And apart from the lack of revenue, how about the food? How about just the basic logistics, the ships that sail in and out of that Persian Gulf every day that unload supplies in Dubai, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia? I've been to Qatar. I was there in 2006 en route to Iraq. And I got to tell you, what a hellhole. I mean, flat, hot. I was there in this time of year. I was there in May, actually, this very time. And when the sandstorms kick up, and yet there are all these British tourists coming in to see what? A flat wasteland that looks like something out of a Mad Max movie? and so, shut down the Persian Gulf. How do these high rises and people survive with the, because, they're eating steak and they're eating lobster and, their life's good as long as that supply chain keeps running. A war breaks out in that supply chain, all of a sudden you've got some chaos there in the Persian Gulf.
Add to that, you remember the Battle of the Cities in the Iran-Iraq War, when they started shooting Scuds and other kinds of missiles at one another's cities?
Yeah.
A lot more sophisticated missiles now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Colonel, we know how much Donald Trump is somehow obsessed with the case of Abraham Accords. Who's in the mind of Donald Trump right now? Who's the main barrier of Abraham Accord? Is Netanyahu, or he sees something else as an obstacle to reach that sort of accord?
I think if you ask it explicitly like that, and Donald Trump has a brain in his head to think that way, Netanyahu. And I think that was reinforced probably with MBZ and MBS, and as well as others, even maybe the Omanis. You cannot bring this to fruition until you control that maniac up there in Jerusalem. I'm sure that was in Arabic a little more gently probably said, but nonetheless, I'm sure they delivered that message. And until you control him, we're going to be very circumspect about how we deal with you. Now, we got all these things going for you and everything's wonderful and you love this place and you made a great speech and everything else. But until you control that guy up there, you got a problem with us.
Larry, do you find that Donald Trump would be able to finally, I don't know, achieve something that he wasn't being able to achieve in his first term, considering Netanyahu?
I doubt it, simply because
let me put it this way, Larry. Why I'm asking this, because right now we have J.D. Vance. I think that he's going to be somehow helpful to Donald Trump's position, and we have Tulsi Gabbard. She understands the region. That's why I'm asking this.
Yeah, Gabbard has no power, no sway. I mean, she's in the DNI position, but she's not a close associate of Trump, and she doesn't. I don't think she has the power to persuade him to do anything. All she can do is provide the intelligence, and you know, I've seen, as Colonel Wilkerson has seen in his career as well. You can put the most rock solid intelligence in front of a policymaker like Trump, and they'll ignore it.
Yeah.
And then later blame the intelligence community for a failure. You know, so and J.D. Vance, again, J.D. Vance is, I think he's more sensible and more capable, and he's not under the thumb of the Israelis, at least not yet. But you know, he's not one that can stop Trump if Trump decides to go in the direction of backing Israel to the hilt. So this, you know, we can describe it as Trump faces a great opportunity, and he's not the first one that's going to just, you know, take that opportunity and trash it and walk away from it. He could, you know, he could get an Abraham Accord where the Gulf Arabs would recognize the right of Israel to exist, but Israel's going to have to recognize the right of the Palestinians to exist. And Israel right now internally is so divided and so split that that's not possible. So it's just, you know, I think we're hoping for something that's really not going to happen.
Colonel, here is what Netanyahu said the other day about the pressure he's receiving from the European countries.
From the European Parliament?
Free Palestine is, for these neo-Nazis, Free Palestine is just today's version of Heil Hitler. They don't want a Palestinian state. They want to destroy the Jewish state. They want to annihilate the Jewish people who've been in the land of Israel for 3,500 years. I could never understand how this simple truth evades the leaders of France, Britain, Canada, and others. They're now proposing to establish a Palestinian state and reward these murderers with the ultimate prize. Well, for 18 years, we had a de facto Palestinian state. It's called Gaza. And what did we get? Peace? No. We got the most savage slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust.
Oh, God damn it.
You won't be surprised to learn that Hamas thanked President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer and Carney for demanding that Israel end its war in Gaza immediately. Hamas was right to thank them, because by issuing their demand, replete with a threat of sanctions against Israel, not Hamas, these three leaders effectively said they want Hamas to remain in power. They want Israel to stand down and accept that Hamas's army of mass murderers will survive, rebuild, and repeat the October 7th massacre again and again and again, because that's what Hamas has vowed to do. I say to President Macron, Prime Minister Carney, and Prime Minister Starmer, when mass murderers, rapists, baby killers, and kidnappers thank you, you're on the wrong side of justice. You're on the wrong side of humanity. And you're on the wrong side of history.
Yeah. He doesn't, he has no capability of sustaining some sort of criticism coming from anybody right now, from Europeans. Your take, Carl?
Well, the fact that he's speaking in English and the fact that the death of those two people in D.C. was underneath him in subscript tells you all about that. It was a propaganda blast from the master of propaganda. He always turns the other side into him and him into the other side, vice versa, when it's conducive to do so. He takes the evil that he's creating and posits it on the other side. Now, I'm not trying to relieve Hamas from any responsibility on October the 7th, but the responsibility of Hamas on October the 7th was caused by an open-air concentration camp that Bibi managed for a long, long time. And it was also caused by the fact that they had no other alternative. Now, I'll be very explicit here. Under international law, if an occupying power is not fulfilling its responsibilities towards the people whom it is occupying, then those people have a right to rise up against that occupying power. Nobody points this out. Nobody wants to point it out. Nobody wants to do international law anymore. And in the other case, look at what he said. The greatest killing of Jews since the Holocaust. Well, let's just say it was 2,000. Guess what? You've killed 200,000 so far. You like those odds, Mr. Netanyahu? You feel like those odds are good? You feel like that half of that population being women and children is good? I mean, you must, because you had a Knesset member go out there and say that child, that baby will grow up to be a terrorist. So kill him now. Kill him in the cradle. Kill him before he grows up. This is what this man is advocating and doing. And yet he keeps pitching these, in English, words out to keep us, basically the empire, who make all of this possible. We're more guilty than he, really. We are the ultimate guilty party in this because we could stop it and don't. He can't stop it. He's a murderer. He can't change that. We could stop it, but we don't. We're the guilty party of greatest significance.
Larry, if he stops it, it would be the final day of his position in Israel. Your take?
Yeah, well, he continues the war because that as long as he's got a war, an external enemy that he can fight, he can stay out of prison. Yep. You know, to equate the deaths of 1,155 Israelis and foreigners that took place on October 7th, when at least probably 300 of those, if not more, were killed by the Israelis themselves. And the Apache, the helicopter strikes on the cars that were fleeing the scene.
It was called Hannibal Directive, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. But this is...
Some of it was that, but some of it was just accident.
Yeah.
They killed
Yeah, I mean, they had one situation where one Israeli colonel confessed that, they fired into a house and they killed... I think the only baby that was actually killed then was killed by the Israelis. They killed one of their own. But to equate that with the Holocaust, I mean, seriously, if the Zionists claim 6 million were murdered by the Nazis, and you're equating 1,155 deaths with that, are you kidding? Yeah. That you at that point you're just minimizing the Holocaust. Or maybe exposing it, from their standpoint as not something that's serious. This is just it's sickening, to be candid. So Netanyahu, when he talks about the murdering of babies and the rapes and such, he's describing what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians on a massive scale. And so this is, like I said, this is not, the United States could stop it. We refuse to act. And I think the only way that this is going to end, it's going to end in bloodshed.
Colonel, if we assume that Donald Trump finally, if we consider ourselves to be optimistic toward the talks between the United States and Iran, and they can get some sort of agreement between the two parties, how is that going to influence the situation with Gaza, with Palestine, and with Israel? We know that how much Arab states are interested in that sort of solution. Your take on the possibilities that would come in the aftermath of any agreement between Iran and the United States?
First, let me say I don't think it's possible with Netanyahu still in charge. I think Netanyahu will do everything in his power to keep it from coming about, to include starting a war unilaterally if he has to, and depend on his allies in Washington to make Trump have to come along eventually, particularly if he gets into duress, and he will, as Larry suggested. This ain't the old Iran. He's going to get into duress very, very quickly. If you look at it from the perspective of how could you get out of this and also have an agreement that Netanyahu didn't do what I said he probably will do to prevent, then I think your chances are really slim. But if you had a real powerful diplomatic team and a real powerful president who was astute and knew the region and wasn't bouncing all over the place, you could probably play these things off against one another or in amongst one another and get an agreement with Iran and restrain Netanyahu at the same time. Yeah. I mean, it's not impossible, but I don't see the talent, the skill, and most of all, I don't see the will, the dedicated will there to do that sort of thing, to achieve both an agreement with Iran and to restrain Netanyahu from ultimately messing that up completely by going to war unilaterally, expecting us to follow.
Larry, do you feel the same way?
Yes. Yeah, no, I fully agree.
Thank you so much, Colonel and Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Larry squared.
See you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.